Welcome to So You Want to Be an Ally. We share our stories
and our insights on non-Black allyship to Black women.
My name is Darlene. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I help parents advocate for their Black and brown kids' emotional and racial identity development needs. And that's because our kids deserve the opportunity to grow, learn, strive, and thrive.
My name is Olanike. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And my life experience led me to becoming an advocate for equity in the workplace, which led me to starting a consulting business where I help workplaces who want to do better. Want to be an ally? Gather round.
And listen up.
So this is where I'm telling you, this is where it got real for me. At first it was just like, oh, let me plant these seeds. This is where it got real.
So we talked about calculations of safety and the risks that our children are exposed to. And we talked about authority figures a lot, but this is like relationships and parents of friends is like a whole nother angle where it's not necessarily that they're an authority figure, but systemically, if you're talking about interactions and relationships between our Black children and other white children, systemically, we know that they're going to have more systemic support in a number of ways if anything goes left.
Yep.
And so that's part of the talk.
The other piece.
The information, that's the other piece that we have to take into account.
At least that's a part of my consideration, because I'll tell you, many of the times I told him he can't go to the sleepover. He went to one sleepover and not another. I walked into that one kid's house, and I didn't like the way that kid was holding on to my kid, and I didn't like the way that kid was yelling at his mama, and I didn't like the way that his mama was just standing there, let that kid hold on to my kid like that. So it brings up what will happen if I leave my kid here by himself.
Yeah.
Remember that recent story where the kids did something to the other little kid who was sleeping over? They made him like drink urine or something. The Black kid went to a sleepover and the white kids mistreated the Black kid.
What?
So, but that's the kind of stuff that I was always fearful of. I was always fearful because there's something very interesting about that age group and the way that they play out the things that they observed and the things they're picking up on. Because what we're not talking about is, again, as we're racially socializing our kids, those kids are being racially socialized too. And at that age, they're playing out and acting out different things too.
They're experimenting with that.
Guess who's the recipient of it? The one Black kid in the whole white group. So real question, like a whole nother podcast, is your child really safe? Yeah. And unfortunately, like you don't have many options if you're like in a community where you're like one of 3 like Black families. Right. So it's like, this is again, going back to the extraness that is parenting while Black. Do I isolate my kids socially? Or do I allow them to have a social experience and interaction? Because we know they need it. Yeah. What do I do? Do I keep them safe? Or do I kind of delay their social development? Right? Like,
no easy answers to there. Like everyone is just calculating and doing the best they can because I think another talk that I wanted to call out is we've sort of talked about authority figures within the school, but there's also another component of the school setting that is about the curriculum that our children are being taught. So as Jala has gone through, school, elementary and middle school now, anytime I'm hearing them talking about issues or, a time period, the civil rights movement, wars, the Reconstruction time, anything that they discuss, the founding, the American Revolution, that's actually where it started. I think that was the first time, because that's early in the curriculum, right? That I was like, interesting. So what did they teach you about that? Okay, and what else? Okay. And they were going on a trip. It's always very interesting. They were going on the trips. We could just have a whole podcast telling stories about these school field trips. They were going on a trip. The first trip, I didn't really make a stink with the school. They were going to Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. And I was like, oh, Lord.
Sounds about white.
They were going to do a haunted tour and this and that. And I was like, okay, Jola. So before she left, I was like, okay, go ahead, go. They've been studying it. So I've had my own curriculum in the car on the rides back home when I would pick her up from school. We had our own other curriculum. Like I have to offset and add on and clarify and provide context for whatever this vanilla version of history is that you're serving up at school. So that's fine. I was doing that. And then they were going on this trip. And I was like, so what I want you to do is ask yourself, and maybe ask the tour guides and whoever it is that they put in front of you, where were the Black people? That's all I want you to ask. Because I don't think they're going to tell you about the Black people and what was going on with Black people at that time. But you are a Black child. And there are other Black children in this group. And I don't think they're going to speak to the things that we've been talking about. She wasn't going to do it. She wasn't going to do it because she didn't want to be a troublemaker.
It's what happened. It's like, Mama, you're just kicking up dust.
Right. But the point is, I want you to have that lens. I want you to understand there is a part of this history that you're not being told. That was the first like kind of school incident. Yep. Well, I took the time to really explain that to her. The next time was a school trip in middle school, and they were going to Charleston, and they were going to go visit a plantation. And there was all this conversation about how the family that lived here were foundational to American history, and they were senators and this and that. And I was like,
slave owners?
Where's the part about where there were slave owners?
Right.
Are we going to go through this whole trip and glorify?
We're going to omit that part.
Slave owners? Like, we're just going to leave that part out. And then we're going to take a tour, and there's some old remodeled cabins.
Oh, God.
And they're going to have a soul food dinner. I was so offended. I was like, I'm sorry. I could not. Girl.
With soul food.
I wanted to spit. So they finished the whole presentation, and it was hilarious because there were about like 5 Black moms in the presentation. And within 10 minutes of that presentation finished, we were in a huddle in the back.
Y'all better do it.
We had to find each other. Some of us had never had a conversation, and we're like, today's the day.
That's right. Hey, my allies that are listening, you're looking for another place to show up? Oh, this is a great place to show up. Because it probably felt wrong to you in a room too. You were like, are they?
You probably felt it. You knew, especially if you're from the South and you have any awareness at all. So, I ended up writing a letter. I know one of the other moms ended up writing her own email and having a couple of meetings with them. And ultimately, they adjusted the curriculum. The part of it that was also interesting is they were going to spend significant time on this plantation and going to visit the oldest tree and da-da-da. And I was like, the whole Gullah Geechee culture is right there. I'm sorry. Why aren't you spending as much energy and time exploring that? Like, why do y'all try to act like Black people don't have history? Like, it's right there. You're going to Charleston. They didn't do the Gullah Geechee thing, but they did have somebody that had that knowledge. They brought a speaker in, so they changed things up. I was like, Lord. And that was a conversation, like, just to bring it back to the topic. Yes. That was a conversation or a series of conversations with the school that Jala was aware of.
Yes.
And I told her when this was starting, if they don't change this, you are not going on this trip.
Absolutely.
You can be mad at me if you want to, but there's absolutely not. I'm not going to have you going to take tours of a slave owner's house, glorifying and talking about we're going to have some soul food at the end of the day. I am sorry, not my child. Nope.
And I think that goes to the point about the other types of talks, right? Because this is not a talk that you had planned out or it shows up on some list. It's often reactionary, right? It's like, hold up, wait a minute. Right. And this is that correcting that we're talking about. This is one of those examples of correcting. And what's interesting about your particular story is that it's correcting before the harm has transpired, right? Yeah. It's like, let's get in front of here and let me plant the seed and dig up anything that you thought was going to happen around this trip. And I think it's very powerful that you even came back and checked in with her and had conversations about what happened, because I found myself doing that too with Chris. Like, let me explain to you why your mama was going off, because right now it looks to you that mama's just upset or she going off about something, she being extra, blah, blah.
Overreacting.
No. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, because they don't really have the full context yet, so they don't get it.
And what I am doing is modeling what they should be upset by.
Yep.
We should not just all lay by the wayside and be like, oh, well, they meant no harm, or, oh, it won't be that bad. No. We pick up dust.
There's
and so that's what you're modeling for her.
Exactly.
You're modeling for her. And by bringing her into the fold, because remember the story about her just not having the awareness at the ice cream thing, right? When she was like, she didn't even think anything about it.
Yeah.
This is an example of us implanting this awareness. Now, in reality, part of the things that I've thought about is like, am I doing more harm than good? But I'm willing to weigh that out.
Always.
Like, because that exposure, right? That exposure to that information, it does take its toll on you. But I would rather you know that your friend who you went over to a sleepover and they're mistreating you, I'd rather you know that. So you know how to exit stage left. Because I really, to that point about another talk, when he went to that sleepover, I explained to him, like, okay, if this goes down, this goes down, this goes down,
right.
I need these are the steps that you need to take. You need to call me, you need to text me. This is the code word you can use.
Yep.
Like I need you to know, like these are the things that you can do.
Those are the rules.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So along the lines of the school trip, I had a different kind of conversation with my son around just curriculum in general. So as a result of the experiences I had up in Michigan around that particular school, I made a decision to prioritize Chris's racial socialization over his academic requirements, right? So what does that mean? Well, I decided to pull him because they were essentially going to send him on a middle school, and the middle school the whole format was similar to the upper elementary. And so they do that up here, by the way, right? Like they segment like lower elementary and upper elementary. And then you
what grades are upper elementary?
3rd through 5th.
Okay.
And then 6th through 8 is middle school. And the reason for that is because their school districts are very small here. So if you're from Cincinnati, you're from large places, like there are like 12 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, 5 high schools. That's not the case here. They have a bunch of little districts. And it's interesting though, and this is what I meant by this Michigan whiteness versus this Kentucky whiteness, is that a lot of these districts are carved out by gerrymandering. So they intentionally went and changed the districts based on how they wanted people to vote. So so you'll see all these little districts, and you'll see like certain communities grouped together that's in this one district, and you'll see these weird lines that move around. Like,
you're like, why are these grouped together? They're literally in different geographic areas.
Funny enough, when I went to this district, they assumed that I was school choice. And school choice is when you try to get into their district because you're not able to live with them. But I wasn't school choice. I was actually in the district, and they tried to play me because I was Black. But it was cool because I helped them out. And so that's the energy.
They got some assistance.
They did.
In their awareness.
They got a 4-page letter. Thank you, Aaliyah. It was an email. I offer my difficult dialogue training resources to them. I'd be more than happy to serve as a consultant. They start putting me on all these programs and set me in all these meetings. They wanted me on diversity, this and parent that. Yeah, that's like got in your ass. That's why.
Yeah.
But anyway, so because of that district, I pulled my child out of that district and put him in a predominantly Black district. And we know, unfortunately, that in most spaces, the predominantly Black districts and schools have less money. And
by design.
Absolutely. And so less money, less resources, the educators, some of them are on a saviorism complex, which is a whole nother podcast. Some of them are there because, they really value their job and they want to see kids do well. And so that's kind of what Chris was walking into. And so once we got into this space, in my making my decision, this is what I realized. I said, yes, he'll probably have fewer resources and he will face different academic challenges, but I am his first teacher. I will be his teacher from here on out. And we just gonna make this shake, because for me, his racial identity development and him being in a space where teachers look like him, and if they didn't look like him, they understood how to interact with him, was way more important. That validation from his peers, right? And again, we dealt with different dynamics, but at least I could eliminate that other layer that I had to navigate having him in that other school.
Calculations.
So, absolutely, right? Calculations of emotional safety. We're dealing with esteem, confidence, right? And this is important. This is so important in the swings. But because of that, I knew what was going on. So he started bringing his schoolwork home, and it was not up to par. And so we would have to have conversations, because I would say to my son, well, son, do this or take this additional step. And it's because I understand what he needs to learn. So mind you, the curriculum, the expectation that they had of him was not at the level he needed to get what he needed at this grade to go to the next level. And I knew that. So he would say, well, Mom, my teacher didn't make me do that, or my teacher or that wasn't part of the assignment, and he would always have some rebuttal. Right. Well, Mom, this, or my teacher said this. And I'd be like, Chris, listen, so many times. To the point where I would say, Chris, this is not a conversation. Let me explain to you why they didn't have you do this. Right. I'm not overworking you. Let me explain to you the school system that you're in. Because by this point, I've been in the PTA. I'm the vice president. I'm walking around the school building. I'm meeting with the principal. I know exactly the resources they have. I know the struggles they're having in the building. I know what they mean when they talk about parent interaction and engagement and how they don't have it. I know what they mean. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching these teachers, this teacher calling out all the time, this teacher, all the kids are talking about this one particular teacher. You got the other teacher who's trying to connect with the kids and uses slang, and it's weird, right? So that conversation is a whole nother thing about when we went to parent teacher conferences, and I told Chris that I was going to talk to her about how she needs to respect like the kids' culture and stop mimicking their culture by trying to use slang. They don't need you to use slang to connect with them, but it happens so often. So that was the gist of the conversation for that entire year. He stopped doing it in 7th grade. I guess what he got sick of saying. My teacher didn't expect it. But that 6th grade year, I was on him. Mom, my teacher did. I said, Chris, you're a young Black boy. They don't expect you to know, and he's amazing in math. They don't expect you to know how to read or write. So for them, if you turn in this BS paragraph that you just wrote that doesn't sound like a paragraph, they will accept it compared to whatever they have in there, and they will give you the A. Right. And you walking around here not even know how to put a full paragraph together. You have no writing skills, and yet they gave you an A. That is not okay. And I saw that so many times. Wow. And so having a conversation with my son and getting my son to understand that, yes, I'm putting pressure on you, but let me tell you how this academic environment has no expectations of you. Yeah. And I need you to understand that I'm going to. And yes, I'm annoying. And yes, I'm making you do quote unquote more work. But the world has no expectation of you. Those teachers in there who's smiling in your face, they don't got no expectation of you. And some of it comes from a place of sympathy. And even and this is the thing that I have with the white saviorism in the education system. So I grew up with nothing. Times we didn't eat, times our lights wasn't on. And I'm smart as hell. Right. So why do I not need to get the next level of skill so to my son? Because if no one had challenged me and gave me an out, quote unquote, because I hadn't eaten, or because my lights was out, I wouldn't have made it to college. I wouldn't have went on to get a master's degree. I wouldn't have went on to get my PhD. So stop selling these kids short. Just because of their environment. Feed them, give them some graham crackers, give them a milk, and sit them down and let them do their work. And that is the difference between some of the Afrocentric approaches to teaching and the white saviorism approach to teaching. That is the conflict. Because the expectations, the standards exist regardless. We're going to get you up to, you might be hungry. You might not have the shoes you need. We'll navigate that. There is case management outside of the classroom, but in the classroom, the expectation is that you excel. And did you also talk to him about why you moved him at all in the first place? Like, did he understand? Yes, actually I did. Am prioritizing identity development. I didn't use those words. I said to him, part of why you struggled last year with your teachers was because I told you last year, they have an expectation of you. Now, this setting, while it eliminates the challenges we had in the other setting where nobody's going to be looking at you different as a Black boy, in that way, they're going to be looking at you different as a different kind of Black boy in this way. So we did have that conversation. And that's a completely different talk because it gave him two different lenses. And I don't even know if it registered. I don't know if he'll come back to me at 30 and say, hey, Mom, that all made sense. But in the moment, I was very verbal and vocal and explained it to him. Like, you needed to know this is the world in which you live. And this is the decision I'm making because you loving yourself. And this is how I told him, you loving yourself and seeing yourself around you and not getting those weird messages about what kind of Black kid you should be. That's why he went to the all Black school. Because this is what we know about going to HBCU. You see all kind of Blackness at HBCU. Oh, everything. Yes. I needed him to go to a Black school so he could see all kind of Blackness. And I told him, you're going to see some kids in there who fighting, who run around there, ain't paying attention in class, who care more about what they got on than anything else. You're going to see that.
Yep.
And this is your chance to decide what kind of Black kid you want to be. And I think that was the best decision I ever made, because the other story, next story and the next one is about Chris, my son, being a different kind of Black kid. That's what that foundation laid.
And it's like, what pathways do we kind of shut down for kids just based on the environment that they're in?
Yes.
So to explore all facets of who they could potentially be sometimes, because they're in an environment where they're getting a certain message about expectations and what's, oh, you like that? That's weird. And so they pursue something that they're actually interested in.
Yep.
You know, yeah.
And it doesn't eliminate it. It just lessens the opportunity that I have as the parent to facilitate that and leave space for him to explore that, because he might hate it. But I know that having him in that middle school, and I know this by every grain of my spirit, that I would have been dealing with way different issues. It wouldn't have been around what kind of Black kid you want to be. It would have been around how are you responding to how these other people are imposing their ideas of what your Black kid should be. That's what that would have been. On top of him also trying to figure out who he is as a Black kid.
Yes.
Right? Because there are still Black students there, and those students arrive at their racial identity development, you know, even in that context. So this is not to say, you know, you have to always choose. I just felt like I had to choose in that moment.
Whew. And he's now got the opportunity to be more centered and clear about who he actually is in a different way than would have been.
Yes.
I think that being, you know, now July's in 8th grade and having gone through this last 4 years at this particular middle school, the academic piece, you know, there's some resonance there. It's funny because it's the same teacher that I described earlier was not a good math teacher. And she was struggling in math. And now thinking about it, it makes me wonder, I hadn't really thought about the fact that this teacher was just problematic around the board. And I think she might still be there. So anybody who knows us and knows, you know, who our teacher was back then will know exactly who it is. So what we saw is she struggled in math. She got so much better in math by the time she was 2 years into middle school that she was in the advanced class.
Yeah.
And continued to be in the advanced math class, and is now going into high school and is being put in a 10th grade advanced math class. And if you would have told me this would be my child in 4th grade, I would have told you, no, we're just trying to get her to pass math.
Yes, right.
It's not everybody's strength. Her strength is in English and writing and like that is her strength. We've known that. She was reading 4 grades, you know, above grade level and all of that. Like we know that. Didn't really think that she was, you know, gifted or would be in advanced classes for math or whatever. I don't know that she's gifted, but be in advanced classes for math. But here she is. So it makes me wonder, like what potential is squelched in these classrooms with these adults, in these environments, in the school settings where there is low to no expectations for you to excel.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah. There's data. We just don't. So one of the things that if you look in the research around test scores and quote unquote at-risk students and urban education and all that, like nowhere do you see teacher racial expectations, right? There is some literature on teacher expectation and academic outcomes, right? But when we're talking about like specifically racial components and how that informs curriculum and how that informs, you know, disciplinary practices, like I wonder if people called it out, because that's the thing, nobody wants to call it out. Like if you ever been in any educational setting, served on any PTA boards, been to any school district meetings or any of that, everybody does a lot of damn pussyfoot. They do not call things as they are. And so that's the thing. Anecdotally, I'm sure we have a lot of examples, but research-wise, it's not captured.
Yeah. Okay. The last talk that I'll talk about, which has just come up recently, and it was really interesting, is colorism. So I think
it just came up now?
It came up explicitly now, and it surprised me.
Yeah.
Because it's another, like, we're similar in the sense that I go off on my, you know, speeches all the time. It's like, oh Lord, here we go again.
Yep.
And so the conversation about colorism started a long time ago, but it wasn't explicit because there had never been a reason to be explicit about it. It's just one of the many, many breadcrumbs that I've been dropping along the way and things that I've been saying. And I've been explicit in saying things and giving her messages about the variety of skin tone and how beautiful everything is and all of that. But the first time that I heard her say anything that sort of was troubling to me along the lines of colorism, she said something about how a mixed child would be so pretty and their hair would be so pretty. And I was like, oh,
like dog ears. Ding.
Yes. So somebody stabbed me in my chest. I was like,
yes.
So I'm like, oh, I failed. My counteracting wasn't strong enough.
Yes.
Silly. So we had to have that conversation right there. That was like, nope. What do you mean by that? More beautiful? Why? What do you mean? You know, so we had the whole conversation and I helped her understand like, this is part of white supremacy, like the valuing of as close to white as possible and all, you know, so we had that conversation, but now I'm like, okay, I need to be hyper aware. Yeah. Because I'm like, is there something there? And what was interesting is in the conversation that we had about it, it wasn't that she was saying they would be prettier. So she wasn't actually doing a comparison thing. Yeah. But just the fact that she was like them having this, you know, I think it was like two famous people, like one of these celebrities dating and having a child, like the kid would be so pretty and their hair would be so pretty. And I was like, what is this? What's happening here?
Let's the spidey senses went off, didn't it?
Now, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's another, colorism is definitely a lane of talk.
Absolutely. That
is also internalized in our community. Like, and it's also global.
It is not unique.
Very popular
exactly.
Product. Okay.
It is people not unique.
You're like,
to
I thought
Americans.
you chocolate and now you light skinned. Like, what happened?
So I learned a bit of information about the Asian culture that was interesting to me. And I learned that the reason why they prefer light skin is different than ours. Like there's some relation from a Black American perspective in that obviously if you were in the house, you were lighter, you were treated better versus being a field slave. Well, theirs is kind of similar in that it's like if you're a fair skin, you were probably of royal lineage, right? So you had the umbrellas. You weren't out
social status.
Absolutely. Interesting, right? When I learned that, I was like, interesting. So when I learned that, I was like, because I'm always trying to look into, that piece of it.
How does this show up elsewhere?
Yes. And so to kind of bring it back to kind of how we parent, I think I use those opportunities where I'm exploring different concepts for myself. I use that opportunity to teach my son as well, because I always give him an example or a context, right? Yeah. Like this is what it looks like for Black people, but we are not the only one, because I also don't want him to be narrow-minded about Blackness either, right? Like we spend so much time hyper-focused about parenting while Black that we leave out all the other connectedness that exists amongst us, right? And so even using the colorism and dating, right? So his attraction. So he's at that age where he'll be 15 this year. He'll be 15 this year. So, right, we're moving into, he likes girls. All right, cool.
Get ready.
Right. Oh.
You good? You good? You ready?
I'm so fine. Because I'm all in his business. Like I be all in his business.
I'm sorry, Chris.
But when
I apologize for her in advance.
Hey. You hear this, Chris? Your auntie apologized for me. Do you accept her apology? I hope you do, Chris. One day you'll listen to this. But I remember when he first, the year when he first got a phone. And so, he had social media. And so I would pay attention to who he would like and what kind of things he would watch. And of course. And when I say of course, I mean, I need parents to be aware. He's automatically going to find the light girls attractive. Now, does social media play a role in that? Yes, because they promote a certain standard of beauty. It's light, it's long wavy hair, long wavy dark hair, or it's the boppy, blonde, skinny white girls, right? Like, so Just go watch it. You can look at it. Like, this is what it looks like from a 13, 14-year-old perspective. Because they're going to be, he's a heterosexual boy, cisgender boy. So he is all into girls and he's all into bodies. And so this is why I was like, oh my God, so how do I do this so I don't also raise a sexist, misogynist little butt face? So, you know, a couple of years ago, we had the conversation about dating white girls and what that meant. Fast forward a little bit, we're having conversation about attraction. And I outright have asked them several, like, all through the last couple of years. Like, so these girls you're attracted to, are you attracted to them just because they're light skinned? I'm just gonna ask you. Straight out ask you.
All right.
Attracted to. Because what I convey to my son, and I've said this to him, if you internalize that, then that says a lot about how you view yourself.
Right.
And as we continue to get older, it will be, and how you view your mother. I ain't trying to put the guilt on you, but I need you to understand, for all of these men out here who have that preference quotient or whatever, like, that is a reflection of how you see yourself. From an abnormal psychopathology perspective, we haven't mapped it out in psychology. Internalized racism, people are working on it.
I was just gonna say
that is a real thing. That is a real thing, and it shows up in dating. And I'm not saying that people don't fall in love, right? There are different reasons why people date. Why, especially, my premise is some black men date white women because that's what they have access to. If you're in a community where you're like only 3 black families and it's only 2 black girls, and you don't find any of those girls attractive. That's what it is. You don't hate black women.
Right.
You like who you like, right? You don't find those 2 girls attractive. You got 2 options. That's not what I'm saying. But there are real men out here who say, I don't like black women because they got an attitude. I don't like everybody else ain't got an attitude. So it's like real intentional turning away from your blackness. Like, you completely rejecting your blackness. And that's why I stay on top of him for that. I stay on top of him because my fear is that he will turn, you know how you were like, oh my God, I don't want her to turn into these.
Exactly.
That's my fear.
Like, what? I lost the fight. I lost the war. No.
Not because he loves her, but because he prefers whiteness.
That's the difference.
That would break my heart. I need you to prefer whoever you're attracted to, whatever shade, length, curvature, whatever it comes in.
They are.
Whatever it comes in. Whether you like them hippie, whether you like them to have no booty, it's your choice. Like, it's your choice. Don't let it show up as you're only aligning with the standard of beauty that has been spoon-fed to you for so many years. The hair texture has to look a certain way, certain color eyes, certain shape of eyes, certain shape of body. And you're completely rejecting everything that has poured into you all your life. That's problematic too.
For sure. It'll be interesting to see how they continue to develop from a relationship dating perspective, for sure, because that's probably the next, like you said, the next like arena and the next level of these conversations with them.
And even for him, it kind of makes sense because I think I'm the only one who has the 14, 15-year-old story with my little youngin'. So thinking about at this stage of identity development, right, where all these things are intersecting now, right? Who you're attracted to, who's attracted to you. What do you like? What do you enjoy? What are your hobbies? Like, he's exploring all of this and pinning all of this down. And if you remember, I told you all, like, I was intentional in his middle school years about allowing him to explore who he is. And he's the anime kid. So my son is not the sports kid, but it's interesting because he's found this balance that I'm really trying to watch and see how it plays out. Because he's smooth, like, he's real cute, like real chocolate. He tall. He got a little, he understands his presence. Like, he still slouch over like a little odd 14, 15-year-old. Like, you ever seen those really big kids? Yeah. Like, they're really big, but they haven't figured out that they exist yet. Like, in that size of a body. But, you watch him around his peers. He's like, I know who I am. So that's Chris. But he's also this like super anime kid. He's all into all the Japanese anime. He loves the Japanese culture. And I have to watch that too, right? Because I don't want him to completely immerse himself in another culture and completely disconnect from his culture. Like, it's nice to value and appreciate another culture, but not at the don't negate who you are. Right. And we know that, again, anti-Blackness goes around the globe. So especially in Asia. So he's that kid. And one of the things that being in this realm and being that type of kid at this age is he has access to his peers at his age though, right? Now, if you ask a Black anime Comic-Con adult, they would tell you like, I didn't think anybody else was doing this. I thought this was a white thing. That's what they would tell you because they didn't have access. They didn't know any other Black people. He doesn't have that problem. He sees Black manga artists. He sees
That's amazing.
Like they just came out with the Black Samurai. Like, and of course I shot over to him as soon as possible. But he gets to see all this. And this is reinforcing his Blackness. Like I can still like these things that society has told me are unfamiliar to Black people or Blackness, and I can still be Black.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of conversation I've been having with him. Like this is an intentional talk about what does Blackness look like for you? Because that is a real conversation. And that is both counteracting and correcting, right? Because he has internalized a lot of these messages and I have to go in and unweave them.
Yeah.
And then lay the foundation for him to explore and establish it on his own. So yeah, that's kind of where I end right now. That is kind of the other talk I've had with Chris. There'll be many, many more.
So I think as we think about the different stories that we've shared, we've talked about talks that are about authority figures and how that might start out with teachers and coaches and be cops one day and your boss down the line and on and on and on. We've talked about their talks that are related to their friendships. And then I guess as they get older, their relationships, their romantic relationships. There are talks that are about how they interact with the school system, which I guess could be also expand over time to become talks about interacting with different systems. Like right now they're in an educational system and that's what's available to them for the most part, at least for our children. And then we talked about talks about their identity development. Like it's like combating internal racism and what does it mean to be Black and how can your Blackness still be intact, even if you like things like, anime that you don't see reflected back to you as a Black thing or as a Black area of interest. I mean, I don't know, what I was, that part of the conversation actually made me think about myself because I was really into Star Trek: The Next Generation in high school. And I'm like, might I have actually grown and being a Trekkie if that was like something that I had access to? I don't know, but that was my favorite show. I was obsessed with it. So there's like these different lanes that I was trying to capture as we were talking. Yeah. And we're, like we always say, we don't have forever. So we got to cut this off at some point, but there's just so much. Yeah. That we have, there's so many talks as we opened up with. And what we would like for our allies to do, is obviously we tell these stories so that you can have a window into our experience and use that to help you become better allies and comrades or accomplices, whatever active term you want to use. We would like for you all to also begin to have intentional talks with your children. Yep. As Darlene has said so many times, our children are being socialized and we're trying to counteract and correct, and your children are being socialized as well. And if you can now from a young age begin to counteract and correct and have some of these different types of talks with them, it would be really powerful. We could really collectively raise children that are going to be able to do better than we are right now. And so we have a few that we want to share, a few talks that we would like you to consider and ponder and have with your budding ally.
And so the first one for me is always an important conversation. And it's honestly never too early to have it because children start to really tap into this aspect of themselves and this level of awareness pretty early on. So the first talk really centers colorblindness. So really challenging this ideology around colorblindness, this idea, I don't see color. How about you have a conversation with them about it's okay to see color? Because imagine laying that foundation and when another kid comes up and say, your skin is the color of poo. your budding ally will be well equipped. Even
Yes.
if the child of color speaks up on their own, your budding ally will be well equipped to say, no, this is what it means for people to have different complexions or different skin tones or that kind of thing in a very age appropriate way. And it's never too early to give that language. And I think that right there is probably one of the foundational talks around color blindness, because that just facilitates openness. That facilitates acceptance. That facilitates awareness and acknowledgement of differences, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we don't, and then that creates this space for, as you've heard us talk about how one conversation laid the foundation for another conversation, then you could talk about whitewashing. Then you can talk about whiteness and what it means and how it exists, right? In the way that allows them to connect with their friends as they continue to grow older, because we all will come into contact with different cultures.
That's really important. The fact of the matter is there is no such thing as I don't see color. Like what you're trying to say, I think for the folks that are actually well-intended, what you're trying to say is I don't associate a negativity to your skin color. That's what you should say.
Yes.
If that's what you mean, say that.
Yep.
If you're in a conversation where you're having where you're talking about racism and the perception of other people based on their race and I don't see color as a false statement. It also negates the experience, the negative experiences that we do need you to see so that you can actually be an ally and help us address it.
Yep.
So if you're saying you don't see color and I'm saying, well, this other person or this system is working against me because of my color, because of my, assigned race. If you don't see color, how can you see that struggle? How can you pick up on it? How can I trust my child with you if you don't recognize that they're being treated differently as a result of their skin color when they're with you? Like, I need you to see the color. So absolutely. All the other things that are happening around it. And I need you to join hands with me and work against those negative perceptions and events and incidents that might be happening. That's what it means to actually be an ally. Not seeing color does me no good.
Nothing at all. And it's erasure.
It's actually more harm. It's more harmful for me and my child for you to not see color.
Yes. And if we're talking about protecting the babies, right? And allyship for, folks showing up to protect the babies. Yeah. It's about protection, because then that person in the hallway would have missed the undertone to that, right? Mm-hmm. The math dynamic, the teacher who's the math teacher, right? That would have been missed. Yeah. It's like, they're just, no, I don't want you to miss it.
I need you to see it. I need you to see it. For that to be something that you're intentionally talking with your children about as they're growing up. When they come to you and they start asking you those uncomfortable questions, I think we've talked about this before, explore it with them. Don't feed them the I don't see color line. Like, I just see them as a human being, because they're trying to figure something out that they're starting to see in the world. And you need to explore, let them explore that and figure out how you can help them in a developmentally, appropriate way to understand what are the things that are attached to skin color that they might be witnessing that shouldn't be. It's okay to see the color and understand how other people might be treating somebody because of skin color. And then you can have the conversation about how you don't want them to do the same thing. And you want them to be able to notice when that's happening around them.
Yep. Which is a great segue into the next talk, right? Mm-hmm. And so the title of the next talk is See It, Hear It, Call It Out. So by that child coming to you at that age, you're modeling for them how to acknowledge, how to also process and express what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, what they're observing, giving them understanding. Yeah. So by you doing that, you're intentionally preparing your child to be a budding ally through directly addressing racism, because they're bringing to you an example, and your first instinct is going to say, well, they may be too young to understand that.
Right.
Well, let's break it down and make it developmentally appropriate, because they couldn't be too young because they saw it. And they brought it to you. So if they brought it to you, then do we have to think of like developmentally appropriate language, right? Like what kind of words do we use to describe the experience? Of course. Yeah. But do we act like nothing happened? Absolutely not. Yeah. So that's absolutely a talk. That's a talk that, our allies can have with their budding allies.
Call it out. And I think just to help you out, language that you can use when your kid asks you a question and you're caught off guard and you're like, I don't know what to say right now. Just be honest about that. You can literally tell them, this is a very difficult conversation. And I want to have it with you because it's important. I need a little bit of time. And can we come back to this later tonight at dinner? If you can't have the conversation in the moment that your kids bring it to you, I mean, I hope y'all aren't walking around here acting like you know it all for your children. I mean, I think many of us are, but I stop. Stop so that you can raise little people who aren't going to go up and walk around and act like they know it all. Because
call them out, Nikki.
Model that first and say, you know what, this is important. I definitely, we're going to talk about this, honey. Let's plan to, come back to this later tonight at dinner or whatever. But don't do that and then not go back to it, because then that will send a very clear message to your child as well. But it's okay to build some space in, go gather yourself, figure out what it is and how you want to address it. So you can address it well instead of, mucking it up. Training them from a young age to be able to see it and then, or hear when it's racism is occurring, and then giving them the right language to be able to call it out or call someone else, another adult's attention to it. Super important. That brings us to allyship. Another talk that we want you to have with your budding ally is to actually talk to them about how you want them to be a good friend, to a good classmate, a good neighbor, a good citizen, whatever. And what that means, especially if you're raising a child that is, becoming aware and having conversations with you about race and racism, about difference, about how people are being treated, then you start talking to them about how do they call it out? How do they stand up for the people that they care about? Yes. How do they stand with them and support them? And how do they stand up for them, when those situations might arise? So it's important to start to have those conversations with them. And honestly, you can start to build that foundation by just, again, talking about how to be a really good friend. How do you care when something is hurting your friend? Yeah. And then you can start from there and build on top of that when your friend is hurting because of racism or because of, homophobia, whatever might be going on, their intersectional identity, like then you can build from there. So it's really important to start early, because that child that you have, especially if we're talking about a white child, is going to grow up to have a level of systemic power that, when they get to a certain age, they may be in positions where they can actually make a pretty big difference in your city, in your state, so you don't know who you're raising. So let's equip all of these children to build a better world for us and them.
You know how people say, well, I'm raising a doctor, I'm raising a pilot. Well, you're raising an ally. Let's talk about that. Yeah. And to the point that you made in a previous episode, I liked when we talked about how to start and anchor this whole entire process with kindness, right? Teaching your kids kindness. You remember saying that?
Yeah. Yep.
It's like teaching your kids to be kind. So that is the foundation of a friend. And then by specifically speaking about allyship, you're just giving them the language. And the same way you give them the language to take up for somebody who's bullying them or who's being mean to someone they like. It's just additional language. Yep. You're helping them name something, and you're helping them like have the language to enact, to like put action behind it, right? Yep. So in the way we teach people to say, well, that's unfair, or that's not nice, you can take it that next step further and say, well, that's inappropriate, or that's not okay to talk to her like that, just about the thing that came up. That is the foundation, I think, that you mentioned before, that I wanted to make sure we put here.
Sure. And last talk that we want y'all to consider having with your budding allies would be about teaching them now at a young age to prioritize impact over intent when they've caused harm, when they've hurt someone's feelings, when someone is saying back to them, that's inappropriate, ouch, that hurt my feelings, whatever it is that they're getting back. It's really important to start to teach them that, yes, understand what your intent was. Intent is important. There are some people out here that are just mean. But most people are not out there trying to be mean. So we're not diminishing intent. what we're saying is when someone else has been harmed, that should be the center of the conversation. So it's okay to say, man, I really didn't mean that. That's all you need to say. And then shift to impact, because the important thing is to prioritize and center and make the person that's been hurt and make them whole again. That's how you build and sustain relationships. You have to heal the harm and mend the relationship to move forward. We know this in other relationships. Like think about when you've been harmed or hurt by someone. Someone has done something that was hurtful for you. Did you want to hear about how they didn't mean it? Or like, is that where you wanted this conversation to be centered when you're still sitting there hurt or harmed emotionally? No. So it's important to start to figure out opportunities. There'll be opportunities to do that with your kids. It may not be in a racialized context. It may just be they did something, a friend of them was upset about it. And it may just be a conversation that you're having with them. Like, did you really understand what they mean, what they meant when they said that they were hurt? Do you know why they were hurt? That's how you start to have them, build the muscle to be able to really think about when someone says that hurt me, for them to understand how that hurt them means they're prioritizing that impact over the intent. And actually, in the act of prioritizing the impact, you're demonstrating the intent that you didn't mean to hurt them in the first place.
Yes.
Am I saying that clearly?
Yeah.
A lot of times people want to sit there, let me bring it to the adult world and the racialized context. When there's a microaggression, we had a couple of episodes on microaggression. Go back and listen if you missed it. We talked about there's a microaggression and the person that was the perpetrator wants to focus the conversation on the fact that they didn't mean it. And so instead of being able to talk about the impact of what they've said, the conversation becomes entirely about their intent. But the fact of the matter is, if you really didn't want to harm me, you would be willing to step off of intent and come over to impact.
That's right.
To make me whole again. That would actually be a stronger demonstration of the fact that you didn't mean to harm me. Absolutely. Than to fit on your intent. Because what you're doing is prioritizing the way your image and you looking like the good guy, or girl, the good guy, the good person. You're trying to just you want to present your image. That's really what you're prioritizing when you stick with intent and you don't want to move to impact. Impact demonstrates your intent. So let's get to impact. So then back to the kids. Let's start to figure out how to train up our children to be able to do that as well.
Absolutely. And again, to the point where it brings us back to the kindness, right? Yes. Brings us back to the kindness. All comes back to the kindness, doesn't it? The kindness, as you pointed out, centers the other person, right? It centers the needs of the individual. And this can be nicely wrapped into conversations about see it, hear it, call it out, conversations about friendship, conversation about allyship. Like this is one that is never too early to lay the foundation. Because they don't have to understand globally, generally, impact versus intent right now. They just need the tools. They need to know, like, hey, when this situation happens, this is how you respond. You can give them the understanding later. Give them the behavior, give them the context as they're able to grasp it as they get older. This is literally what our stories have been as we're describing our racial socialization to our kids. This is what we've been doing. And so in the same way that we do that, this is what we're offering our allies. You're constantly planting seeds and nurturing and weeding out, right? That's our correcting. Weeding out things that don't help so that our babies' flowers can open and grow and expand, and then they get pollinated and then they spread out, right?
Yes.
That's what we're asking of our allies. We want just a vast garden of beautiful people and all the different colors, types. How many types of flowers are there in the world? Like really? Exactly. That many. So if it's that many flowers and you go to a florist and you're planning your wedding and you're doing your bouquet, are you going to tell your florist, like, I don't see the differences? You're alive.
I don't see different flowers. I just want
see
flowers.
color. You don't see color? So I can put all these different, okay. So we understand it when it comes to flowers, but we don't understand it when it comes to people. Make it make sense.
Right. Because what's really happening is you're avoiding an uncomfortable conversation by just wanting to default. So I don't see blindness. Yep. You know what I want? I want the song Free Your Mind. I was like, what is the name of the song? Free Your Mind.
Yeah.
Free Your Mind.
Vogue, yeah.
I want them to redo the song, and I want them to scratch the line, be colorblind from the lyrics.
Yes.
Somebody did that song on one of these singing shows recently. We were watching it.
And it made you screech. Like, oh, yes.
The era of colorblindness.
Yes.
Like, no. So,
only the DEI people get it.
I know. It's like, no, don't be colorblind. Be color brave. We can borrow that. Look up the TED
I like that. Who said that?
TED Talk. Melody Hobson, I think.
Oh, yes. I love that.
Let me look that up real quick. Did a TED Talk about being color brave. So I want them to do it over and replace colorblind. Yep, Melody Hobson. Yes.
So with that, you all, we thank you for joining us. We've given you a great deal to think about. We want you to reach out to us if you have any questions, ideas, thoughts about any other types of conversations that allies want to know about how to grow their budding allies, or how to deal with stuff when your kids come to you and they're trying to understand. That's what we're here for. That's why we're having a whole parenting edition, because alongside what we do as Black mothers, we understand that we want to have our children live in a space where, all of the things that we're preparing them for is eliminated in their age groups. That's ideally what
that would be a dream.
Yes, yes. And you notice I didn't say the adults. It is what it is. I'll deal with the adults. Nikkei, you'll deal with the adults. But for our kids, we would love for them to have fewer experiences than what we've had.
Exactly.
Growing up.
All right, folks, we're going to end it there for now. We want to make sure we hear from you, so send us a note or your thoughts on the question of the day. And if you want to speak to us on a topic, send it our way. You can find us on our social media platform at wannabeanally, or email us at wannabeanally@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to So You Want to Be an Ally wherever you get your personal podcasts.
You can find me, Olanike, at my website, www.mosaicforequity.com. That's Mosaic, MOSAIC, 4 as in the digit 4, equity, EQUITY. Follow me on Facebook and on LinkedIn at Mosaic for Equity. You can find me with that handle, and on Instagram as well.
You can find me, Darlene, at my website, www.parentzonellc.com. And follow me on Facebook at Donnie Davis, that's DAUNI, and Parent Zone LLC. And on Instagram at PZ Parenting Coaching. All right, we're out.
Bye.
See you later.